Where is God? Agnes Boiachiu once asked a variation of that question to a bishop during adoration. Agnes was born in 1910 to a devoutly Catholic family. Besides their daily prayers and weekly Mass attendance, the family also expressed their faith in and love of our invisible God with a weekly visit to the poor to bring food and clothes and good company. Like any Catholic family, and even many secular ones, Christmas was a time of joy and celebration and communal family gathering and food, of course. Agnes herself, however, always found a way to go back to those poor families on Christmas Day. Eventually, Agnes joined the Sisters of Our Lady of Loretto in order to become a teacher, hopefully to the poor. For 18 years, however, she was mostly a teacher for the children of wealthy families, though she found ways to get her students to make weekly visits to the poor, as she had done as a little girl. And then in 1946, Agnes had a mystical encounter with our invisible God. Though she neither saw nor heard him audibly, the words of Jesus Christ from the cross, "I thirst," were deeply impressed upon her heart and mind. And she spent the next 2 years going through the process required to leave the Sisters of Our Lady of Loretto to get some training as a nurse. On Christmas Day, 1948, Agnes, who was then known as Teresa, went to morning Mass and then went by herself to the poorest part of Calcutta, one of the poorest cities in the world, and spent the whole day caught up, visiting with families, playing with children, and sharing Christmas joy until realizing that she, like the Holy Family, did not have a place to sleep and had to go knocking on doors in the middle of the night until someone gave her a room. The next day, she taught 5 children using sticks in the dirt. Within a month, Mother Teresa found herself teaching over 40 children every day without any tools or buildings. By 1979, Mother Teresa had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and today there are over 5,000 women in her order, the Missionaries of Charity. They serve the poorest of the poor, loving Christ in what they call the distressing disguise of the poor. Not that it was all steady progress and growth. It was later in her life that Agnes, Mother Teresa, asked the bishop that question, "Where is God?" She actually said, "Where is Jesus?" And the bishop, a bit taken aback, pointed to the Eucharist and the monstrance and said, "Right there, Mother," which is, of course, true. Mother Teresa never lost her faith, though she went through long periods of not clearly seeing God, even metaphorically. God's divine nature is invisible to us always, but sometimes he seems a bit more invisible than others. Yet Mother Teresa persevered in striving to see Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, in the poor, in every human being. For this reason, many people personally remember her as an example of Jesus Christ himself. And she made God visible to the world, even when she couldn't always see him herself. It's no accident that Mother Teresa's most famous ministry began on Christmas Day, the day we celebrate God made visible in a tiny child laying in a manger. The invisible God was, for about 33 years, literally visible on earth in the person of Jesus Christ, born on Christmas, killed on Good Friday, raised on Easter Sunday, and ascended into heaven 40 days later. But even then, it was not obvious to most people that he was and is God. Depending on a person's experience of suffering and darkness, of loneliness and poverty, of distraction and busyness, the invisible God was more or less difficult to see, even when he was standing visibly in front of them. So that question of Mother Teresa's in adoration, that where is God, where is Jesus, is a universal human question, the one we all ask. Even if we know up here that God is everywhere, even if we know by faith that Jesus is present in the Eucharist and the other sacraments, we still ask this question, or should. Tonight is the answer to that question. The invisible God made visible in Jesus Christ. At our creation, God made every human being a visible sign of the invisible God, made in his image. And through his incarnation, Jesus Christ only elevates that truth. Now God himself literally has a human body like you and I. Though you and I are not actually God, we are the only physical thing in the universe that looks like God. Even the Eucharist still looks like bread, but Jesus looks like a human being because he is. The baby Jesus, so sweet, so cute, so heartwarming, is an absurd cosmic contradiction, a paradox so profound we cannot truly comprehend it. The invisible God who exists beyond time and space and fills all time and space. At the conception and birth of this child, that God is visibly in the universe at a particular time, at that particular place, with his body speaking those specific words. Where is God? In a manger in Bethlehem. Where is God? In a random town in Samaria, talking to an adulterous woman. Where is God? Locked in an underground cellar, illegally held for a crime he did not commit. Where is God? In every single particle of the Eucharist, and sacramentally present in every baptism, confession, confirmation, anointing of the sick, every valid marriage, every ordination of a deacon, priest, or bishop. Where is God? In every human being, especially the distressing disguise of the poor. But what does this answer do for a person who never considers the question honestly? What does it do for the person who asks the question but finds that answer unconvincing? What does this answer do for you when your depression is so bad you can't get out of bed or do more than merely survive? What does it do for you when natural disasters and horrible disease kill the best and most innocent of people? What does it do for you when addiction or weakness or simple carelessness puts you again and again and again in the position of feeling like you are irreparably damaged, worthless, beyond hope? Where is God? And why in the world does he have to always be so dang invisible? There are good answers. There are even true ones. But when we ask that question, what matters almost as much as the answer is the timing of the answer, the disposition of the hearts when we ask the question and hear that answer. Telling a mother about God's infinite power to pull good out of evil isn't terribly effective if they're in the middle of a fit of grief-induced rage at the loss of their child. Speaking eloquently of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead can be counterproductive if you're talking out the window of your expensive car to a man starving in a ditch while you have the remnants of your last meal purchased without a thought laying on the floor of that car. We need the theology. There is a time for rhetorically brilliant exhortation about supernatural hope in the midst of tragedy. There is, however, far more time and greater need for presence, for being present, a love that makes the invisible God visible. Mother Teresa didn't need the bishop to explain that Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity is present in the Eucharist when she asked him, "Where is Jesus?" during adoration. What she did need, fortunately, was for him to do what he was already doing, being in that dark room with her and the Eucharist, showing her Jesus by his faithful worship and prayer before the sacrament. The poor of Calcutta definitely needed to hear about Jesus in words. They still do. First, however, they needed to see the invisible God made visible in Mother Teresa herself, made visible by the way she looked at them as if they were Jesus. Mother Teresa, within the first 24 hours, was teaching children directly about Jesus and many other things. And she never stopped talking about Jesus. But throughout her life, she answered the question, "Where is God?" with her presence first. So where is God? Here. This is what Christmas is about. God made visible, visible in the Christ child, visible in every sacrament, visible in every choice that is guided by the virtues of faith, hope, and love given us through baptism and confirmation and the daily practice of our religion. And if you do not see him right now, do not be afraid. That's normal. It's also not permanent. Do not be afraid, and do not think that you're supposed to find a perfect answer to the cry of your heart, "Where is Jesus?" Even the shepherds and the magi, led to Christ by angels and stars, walk away wondering. Even Joseph and Mary lose track of Jesus for a few days. But he is here. So rejoice. If today God is made visible to you in the festivity and prayer and loved ones gathered around, rejoice and remember to let others see God made visible in your joy and your charity. Remember, he is made visible to you not so that we can be done with looking. He is made visible to us so that we can learn to love and live for what is still invisible. And if today you do not see him, do not be afraid, because he is the invisible God. You do not need to see him to know he's there. Remember when you have seen. Remember that others see what you do not. Visible or not, you can still do as Mother Teresa. To ask where he is, even as you're staring at him in the Eucharist. To look for him by giving him food or drink or clothing or shelter or even a smile in what you give to the poor. Do not be alarmed if the disguise of God is distressing. Only persevere in loving him through that disguise. Where is God? God the Son, eternal Word from before all creation, became flesh and dwelt among us. He dwells among us still in the Eucharist and in the poorest of the poor. Come, let us adore him, serve him, love him, so that the invisible God can be made visible, not just in churches or paintings or sacraments, but in our own flesh and blood.